Welcome everyone. My name is Brianna Monroe, and last time we were reading together I was on part 1 and letter B. So this one will be part 1 letter C because we are still on chapter 1, the reality of war facing the battle. So that's what part we're on right now. And I have a puppy who is not having it right now. He's okay. You want to say hi to everyone? Come here. Come here. Want to say hi? Oh. Yeah, he might be a little high maintenance, so it's going to be kind of hard to make this video. I'll probably have to pause it a lot. But yes, here is, oh, he's tangled in my necklace. Hey, say hi. Hello. He's scruffy. He had a bath today. So, yeah, don't mind him. You might hear him crunching on a bone in the background. I was hoping he would be in his kennel, but he was crying. So, yeah. Okay, Beans, go play. Don't pee under my desk. Go get your bone. Go get your bone. Anyways, so yeah, we were on chapter 1 and it was part B, and now we're gonna be part C. Okay, before the puppy needs me again, vamos a empezar. Let's get into it. Okay, we were on the top of page 48. Here's my bookmark, a little leaf. I don't know why I liked always since I was a kid saving leaves in books or flowers, because it like presses them and saves them, and I don't know, it's just special. So yeah, usually the bigger ones are from like my kids picking them out for me because they're like, you love leaves. Okay, there are 2 broad categories of abuse: sexual contact and sexual interactions. Sexual contact involves any type of physical touch that is designed to arouse desire, physical and psychological, in the victim and or the perpetrator. Physical touch can include, at the most severe level, forced or non-forced intercourse, oral or, the other one starts with an A, sex, 24% of victims. At the severe level, forced or non-forced manual stimulation or penetration. Man, I don't know if I can say this. Like, this might be a really hard book to read. Like, I didn't realize it was gonna be like so graphic. So top fondling or more, or any more form of simulated intercourse, 40%. And at the least severe level, forced or non-forced kissing, touching of clothed top or butt, thighs, or genitals, 36%. The categories imply a continuum of severity, but all inappropriate contact is damaging and soul distorting. Now, that, like, let's pause for a second. It doesn't really matter like how severe it is. I know that every single level of that kind of abuse is devastating and traumatizing and can leave you like feeling super disgusting and like not knowing what to do. So I do agree with that. And sorry, like I didn't realize it would be so like kind of graphic. Like I said, I'm experiencing this book for the first time too. So if it gets like too much, we can always like just get another book. But all inappropriate contact is damaging and soul distorting. 73% of the least severely abused victims report some damage, and 39% report considerable to extreme trauma as a result of the past abuse. So, and notice they're not saying like 100% of victims report, because they don't. You know what I mean? And this percentage is still just a chunk of whoever they've surveyed, especially like whoever this person is that's writing this. It could be like a percentage of like whoever he's talked to or something, you know? So the numbers are sad. Interactions are far harder to acknowledge because they do not involve physical touch and therefore do not seem as severe. So like the interactions, like kind of the stuff you probably do with at work or, you know, or like at church, of course, like the creepy things people say and stuff like that. Many times they involve a subtle invasion that leaves the victim wondering if it occurred or if it is a byproduct of her own distorted imagination. Totally get that. Interactions can be categorized as visual, verbal, or psychological. Visual abuse involves interaction where the child is forced or invited to watch arousing scenes or pictures, or is observed by the perpetrator in a state of undress that is arousing to the adults, which is like, it's so icky. Like, honestly, it's just, ugh. The client's father used to leave pornographic literature in the bathroom before she would take a shower. After she had begun to bathe, he would enter the room and retrieve his magazine, lingering for a moment to observe his daughter's teenage form silhouetted behind the shower door. I know so many people can relate to this stuff, but some of it's like triggering for me. Like, I just, that's yuck. And like, that's not even my experience with like that, but like mine's different. But like, still, I don't know. I just, it might just use caution while listening. This was not an inadvertent mistake. The pattern was confirmed in other visual instructions. One young teenage boy returned home each day with a mixture of trepidation and excitement, wondering if his alcoholic mother would be drunk and naked or partially unclothed, lying on the living room couch. Each time he swore he would not look, but his teenage curiosity and growing responsiveness to visual cues betrayed him. That is so sad and gross. Like, honestly, like, it just makes me, like, as a mom, like, ooh, you gotta be, like, really careful, because that's such, it's so gross. Like, not that I'm doing anything, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just you. When you don't really, like, hear of that, and then you find out somebody does that, it's like, oh my, I, like, never wanna ever be seen like that, or, like, make your kids feel a certain way, you know, like, that's, yeah, like I said, this, a parent or adult who finds arousal in watching a naked child or introducing a child to S stimuli through pornography or we'll just skip that word, some exposure, okay, has without a doubt S victimized that child. So what they're saying is basically, if a kid has been like exposed themselves, or they are shown photos and like inappropriate things, like that is an S abuse to a child. And some like might not even think that. Some might be like, whatever, they're just looking at it or whatever, you know? So I feel like it's probably an easier thing to justify, and easier for the child to not realize that they're like being abused and that it's super wrong. Like, the kid's probably gonna automatically feel like it's wrong, because like, you're created to like kind of know right from wrong. Like, there's like feelings. You know, like most people have a conscience, and then they can kind of know like, ooh, this does not seem right, because it's not right. And the poor kid is like, oh, it's my parent. And it's almost just like, I don't even know if it's almost, it is such a worse crime of betrayal when it's a parent to a child. Like, it's just, I don't know, it just makes me really angry. So S verbal interactions can be equally abusive. A good friend of mine casually discussed her father's lifelong habit of talking about her body as if he were expressing interest in her grades. Every day he visually scanned her developing body as if he were looking for evidence of head lice. He measured her skirt, checked out her hair, evaluated and judged her boyfriends, and most embarrassingly commented on her body in front of her dates. His bilally enduring term for her was TT. No one knew what it meant for years, but she knew. He was referring to her breasts. Such repeated verbal degrading obviously constitutes emotional abuse, but it should not be ignored, as it also violates the young girl's S identity. Verbal S abuse can also come in the form of suggestive or seductive interactions. A woman recalled her disgust in being around her grandfather. Every time he saw her, he would wink and chuckle. Her internal discomfort was viewed as disrespectful by her parents. That is so rude and gross. And let me pause for a second, because if you're like new parents, please don't ever bribe your kids to give physical affection, or even make them say like, I love you to someone they don't want to say I love you to. Don't give them candy to hug their grandparents. Don't push physical affection on them, because A, that might not be their love language, and they may actually despise being touched. And so don't push them into it. Like, welcome it, encourage love, encourage hugging and stuff, like as an an appropriate way. Like, of course you want like a child to feel loved. Like, yes, give them an innocent hug and stuff like that. But don't force it, because my kids, they're my like ex-in-laws and stuff, they would do that a lot, and it would make me feel so weird. Like back then I didn't think it as bad because like I didn't think it was like an S situation. It's just the premise, like the whole idea of bribing your kid and pushing it on them. If they're like crying and like wanting to get away from you, just don't. Like, sorry, but I had to interject because I think that's super important for all ages. Like, don't make your teenage daughter hug that uncle. Don't make that, you know, your teenage daughter hug the grandparents. If she doesn't want to, she doesn't want to. Or your teenage son, like if he doesn't want affection, like I know my son growing up, like he was not an affectionate person like towards me, and I was never going to push that. And you know, I'm a stepmom, so I was super cautious about that. And it's like, now he'll give me hugs, but I waited until he was older, and then he invited it. I did not ever want to push that on him. That's just like my own experience, because I don't ever want to make someone feel uncomfortable and have like unwanted touches. If they're not a physical person, you know, like they don't like a lot of hugs. Some kids, you know, they're complete strangers will come up and be like, oh, I want to give you a hug, you know, because like that's just, you know, how they're created, and maybe that's their love language. But yeah, just gotta interject. Don't do that to kids. It's gross. So, let's see. Her internal discomfort was viewed as disrespectful by her parents and as a symptom of craziness in the young girl, which that's so sad. Like, that makes me sick to my stomach, because kids, especially if they're an IFB, get in trouble for everything. So if they thought she was disrespectful, she could have been like smacked or grounded or something like that, and then felt even worse that like she doesn't want to have this affection, and yet like she'll get in trouble. She doesn't, you know. Okay, that lasted for 30 years until I probed for other interactions with her grandfather. It finally came to light that he would wait until no one else was around and then say, "You are so sweet, I could eat you. Come here, honey, and let me taste your lips." Ugh. Was he a silly old man, innocent but slightly inappropriate? Or was he a S-suggestive abuser who used words as the stimulant that increased his perverse S arousal? One indication is that he spoke like that only when he was alone with his granddaughter. His other grandfatherly embraces went unnoticed because they were innocent enough apart from his suggestive remarks that highlighted his lengthy hugs or kisses. Nevertheless, every time he touched her, she felt disgust and tightness. Poor thing. Actual seductive verbal interactions are easier in most cases to discern. To be invited to take a shower with a dad, or to go down in the cellar with your brother, or take a long walk in the woods with your uncle when S cues are emitted or past S abuse has occurred, clearly are abusive encounters. Verbal abuse is a powerful and deep wound. S abuse words produce the same damage as S abuse contact. Yet the potential for minimization or feeling weird for being damaged makes the potential for change even more difficult for those who subtly abuse than for those more severely abused. And that's so true. So I feel like it's hard enough to come forward about the physical stuff. And I think like he's saying, if it's just like verbal, you're just like, well, like he's just saying stuff. He didn't actually do anything. And I just know that's a struggle for a lot of people. Because, I mean, boys and girls, it can happen to both, and men and women, you know, where it's like just the constant comments that make you feel really yucky. And you're like, okay, I know he didn't touch me, but it is like really uncomfortable. So totally get that, but it is really tricky. A final category of interaction is psychological S abuse. There is an obvious overlap between visual and verbal S abuse and psychological abuse. Psychological SA will occur through verbal or visual means, usually both, but it will involve more subtle, non-specific, more mood-generating communication that erodes the appropriate role between, or boundaries between, a child and an adult. For example, a mother who seeks advice or solace from a teenage son about her S struggles with his father has stepped across the line. weird. Between honest sharing and pandering. To pander is to act as a go-between in love intrigues. To act as a pimp solicits involvement for his own benefit. A father who uses his daughter as a surrogate wife or confidant has bound his daughter's heart to him in a subtly way. Types of SA: contact and interaction. Contact, very severe. I don't think I'm going to read all these descriptions. It's basically like I already read it a little bit earlier, and it makes me cringe, like, and feel uncomfortable. So, maybe I could just like copy and paste the description, maybe. I don't know. It's a little bit much for like the video. So it's basically this whole chunk right here on page 50, and I'll not read the details. How about that? And then you can go and Google them if you don't know what they are. But basically, contact, very severe. The next category is severe, which is like less touching and aggressiveness. The least severe is like kissing, touching, groping kind of stuff. And then interactions verbally, let's see if I can pull out any of these words. Direct solicitation, direct solicitation. And then like just describing things, talking, basically you're talking about it. And then visual would be like pictures and showing things, either yourself, photos, videos, that kind of stuff. And then psychologically would be like intrusive interest in bodily functions, clothing, development, and just different things that they could do to like just get in your head, basically. So the psychological one is like getting in your head about things that like could sound innocent from a parent, but could also be like super intrusive and gross. All right, moving on. I guess that's what I'll do if it's just like too much. I will just skip it. The damage may not be overt. The damage may not be overt. And in fact, the daughter may feel so special that she would defend to her death the appropriateness of her father's interactions. It is nevertheless abuse. In the same way, a mother who talks about her son as being her man or companion or her surrogate husband has set up a dynamic of competition with her adult husband and a sense of bonding uniqueness for the son that involves or that violates the natural boundaries between mother and son. Whenever a parent or caregiver uses a child to fulfill overt desires or more subtle longings related to the adult's identity, abusive dynamics will be unleashed in that child's soul. The fact that abuse can be subtle ought not cloud our perspective that it is equally abusive and damaging. The very nature of satanic harm is that it is perpetrated by the father of lies who masquerades as an angel of light. Whether the perpetrator is acting under the direct satanic sway or indirectly in the way that all sin can be ultimately tied to Satan's province, a certain degree of deceit and subtlety can be assumed in all SA. Who are abusers? The abuser can be anyone. He can be your father, your pastor, your brother, your 17-year-old, your next-door neighbor. Often a victim has had so many abusers that it seems as if he or she sent a serial letter inviting them to join in the debauchery of abuse. It is not unusual to see a client who has been abused by several family members, a neighbor, boyfriends, teachers, counselors, or employer. The abuser may be a man or woman. It is far more common for a young girl to be abused by an adolescent or adult male, but it is inaccurate to presume that men do not abuse boys or women do not abuse girls and boys. The abuser may be decades older or the same age. He or she may have an honored role in your family, or may not be known to you or anyone in your family. In any case, the perpetrator will have a face, a voice, a smell. Even if you cannot recall any details about him, he will be like a faded picture you carry in your wallet. That is so true. Like, sometimes I think that too, like about the details. If I had to go to court and like say everything that happened, sometimes it's like blurred together, or it's like I know that it happened. And I thought about that the other day. Like, sometimes traumatic things, like, you don't know exactly minute by minute every single thing that occurred, especially if it's more than once, and they kind of all blend together, but it's like, you know that it happened, and you know it's like disgusting and everything. But I think that's kind of what he's describing. It's like, you may not even have like the perfect face, it's just like a shadow, or like, you know, I don't know, it's just, I totally get that. He will be like a faded picture you carry in your wallet. Though you may not have seen him in 30 years, or you may have eaten lunch with him yesterday, he still plays a significant part in your daily life, and likely an even greater role in every dream and nightmare. Yeah, that's the truth. A great deal of research has been done about the perpetrator and the effects of his abuse. The focus of this book is not on the abuser, nor on the variance in damage caused by different kinds of perpetrators. This book explores the nature of the damage done to the soul of the victim by any kind of SA, irrespective of the perpetrator. The abuse victim, however, often defends or ignores the perpetrator, especially if the abuser was a family member. It is important, we're going to page 52. It is important to understand how this is done. Many who have been SA'd tend to make excuses for the perpetrator or minimizing the damage. The most typical way is to find comfort in the fact that at least the perpetrator was not one's closest, most intimate caregiver or friend. Betrayal by an intimate, deeply trusted companion is almost too much for the soul to endure. The victim does not want to face that the perpetrator may have been a person with access to the deepest recesses of his or her soul, a bearer of a key that no one else possessed. For this reason, many who have been abused by an uncle will say, "At least it was not my brother, or even worse, my father." Or if the abuse was perpetrated by someone outside the family, the relief centers around the fact that it was not a relative. The fearful and fallen heart does not want to anguish over the loss of safety and nurturance. The abuser was abused as a child. He had a hard background that would have made anyone a little crazy. He was going through a terrible time with his wife, and he was so lonely. He drank to the point that he just didn't know what he was doing. So how could he be held accountable? He did so many wonderful things for people. How could I be angry for just one failure? All excuses should be silenced. The perpetrator committed a crime against the abused person's body and soul. Okay, we're on page 52. Let's pause for a second. So that right there, super meaningful. And I love that even if this is a Christian author, like I was a little worried when I heard like, churchy stuff, because for you that don't know, if you're here for the first time, welcome. Sorry, it's a little deep. But our Blind Eye Movement page is all about like IFB and abuse within the churches, and IFB is Independent Fundamental Baptist Churches. And they were very much about excuses, like forgive, forget, and, he's just a fallen Christian, or he stumbled and we need to forgive, and like the wife needs to stay married and stick to the marriage commitment even though he abuses children, and maybe even her own children. And a lot of people were getting advice from pastors that they need to work it out. And I'm all about sticking to a marriage, I'm all about commitment, I'm all about forever, but not at the cost of children, and I'm just so happy to hear that. Like, what was that phrase? All excuses should be silenced. That should be in all caps. All, well, yeah. All excuses should be silenced. Like, all excuses, because I really struggle with this. I feel so guilty sometimes when I think about, like, there is actually a living human being in prison, and in my head, because of me. You know, like, if I didn't tell, he would have never went to prison. So it's a lot to deal with. And so far, I love this part. That's my favorite part. Like, all excuses should be silenced. Because I'm an excuse giver. Like, I will give excuses. I will wash things away. Like, it's no big deal. At least it wasn't this. It wasn't that bad. And I'm happy and thankful for that part of my personality that can see, like, the silver lining. And, like, I am my own silver lining. Like, that's a song I wrote was silver lining. And, like, I am that silver lining. And I try really hard to be positive. But I love this to, like, not make excuses for them. But, like, it is abuse. Cut and dry. Baptists love black and white. Well, they could be like, nope, black and white. You abuse someone, you're gone. You don't get to keep preaching. You don't get to keep singing in the choir. You don't get to keep teaching other kids in other states. And you don't get to move away to another church because, like, oh, just slap you on the wrist. Like, no. Boys and girls shouldn't hang out together. They treated it as if it was like a teenage boy, like, kissing a girl. And, like, well, that is breaking the rules. They, could get expelled. But they're treating it like that when it, like, that wouldn't have been abuse. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, anyways, let's get started again. Vamos a empezar. A central point needs to be highlighted again. SA is damaging no matter how the victim's body is violated. At first, many will doubt the veracity of that claim. It does not immediately stand to reason that being violated or violently AR'd by one's father can be compared to being lightly touched through the clothing by a gentle, grandfatherly next-door neighbor. No one would question that being AR'd by one's father will be far more difficult to deal with than handling the nuance of a pawing dirty old man. The degree of trauma associated with abuse will be related to many factors, including the relationship with the perpetrator, the severity of the intrusion, use of violence, age of the perpetrator, and the duration of the abuse. But in every case of abuse, the dignity and beauty of the soul have been violated. Therefore, damage will be present. Whether one has been struck by a Mack truck traveling 50 miles per hour or merely hit by a tricycle rolling at the same speed. Obviously, there are certain abusive relationships that are more damaging than others. An assumption that can be made about SA with all other factors being equal damage will be in direct proportion to the degree that it disrupts the protection and nurturance of the parental bond. There are two issues related to the potential disruption: the abuse and the revelation of the abuse. When abuse is perpetrated, it sets into motion the tremors of an internal earthquake that requires a strong and nurturant environment to quell. If that environment is unavailable, or worse yet, if the environment is hostile, cold, and or insensitive to the resultant damage, then a victim will set aside the internal process of healing to ensure his or her own survival. True, they'll just like basically go into hibernation of their survival and just kind of survive until they're like free and able to heal finally. I think I bumped the light, sorry. For this reason, incest is usually more devastating than extrafamilial SA. Relationship with an older cousin will not be as traumatic as the same experience with one's father. A father is called to be a secure, trustworthy, and life-generating surrogate for God until the child develops the capacity to see his or her heavenly father as the only perfectly trustworthy source of life. The victim's struggle to trust will be proportionately related to the extent her parents failed to protect and nurture her as a child. Intrafamilial will also I might shorten the word abuse because it says it so much as just A, but then that kind of might get confusing, so maybe I'll say abs. I don't know. Like, I feel that, like, I didn't realize it's gonna say it so much, but who knows? You know, I don't read a lot. You know, this is like the first time I'm reading this, so bear with me, and who knows? YouTube may just block it altogether. I don't know. We'll see. Intrafamilial A will almost always be more devastating, except when the revelation of extrafamilial A threatens to damage the relationship with the victim's parents or other family members. If a child were to report to his parents that a neighbor was fondling him several times a week, he might fear being doubted or worse, blamed for the abuse. That is the worst. He might have 100 other reasons to fear his parents' response. Therefore, his fears the repercussions of the revelation. Therefore, he fears the repercussions of the revelation to the degree that confidence in the love and respect of one's parents is disturbed. The damage of intra or extrafamilial A will be more traumatic. To summarize, the first task in entering the battle is facing the fact that a battle exists. There are many who will read this chapter and label for the first time the awful experiences at home, school, or church as SA. Facing the reality of past A is a process. It does not happen quickly or in one climactic moment of honesty. It usually occurs over a lengthy time, during which the past abuse is seen in light of current choices of flight or fight. Often the memories of the past A are accompanied with little emotion other than disbelief or incredulity. It is not usual for the memories to be separated from emotion. Often it is as if they are frozen on ice or in ice, seen but not able to be touched. Other times the memories will be recalled in small details that seem to have lost context, specificity, or meaning. To open one's heart to a truth that is deeply devastating seems at first foolish. However, the hard, cold parts of our soul are continually tempted to thaw by the warmth of the longings of our soul. Every pleasant interchange is an invitation to life. Every deep sorrow stirs the passion of grief. Those daily temptations to life are viewed by the person who has been SA'd, at best as a 2-day vacation to a warm climate, and at worst as the melting of the polar ice cap. A total meltdown spells disaster. Therefore, the icy soul must remain frozen and hidden. The SA person often denies the abuse, mislabels it, or at least minimizes the damage. The enemy goes unrecognized or misunderstood, so the victim cannot fight the battle. Once the war is avoided, then something must be done with the wounded heart that cries out for solace and hope. The cry must be heard or squelched. Sadly, the choice is usually to stifle the groan. What normally mutes the cry is the internal dynamic that promotes denial, mislabeling, or minimizing. The dynamic involves the subtle workings of shame and contempt that serve to keep the soul frozen in the warmth of life at a distance. The next 2 chapters will explain the internal dynamic that unnecessarily deepens the wound. All right, that's page 54. And so next time will be chapter 2, the enemy, sin, and shame. So let me know what you guys think. I talked a lot through this one, so I won't give you too much commentary right now. But this part that I just read was chapter 1, part C. And I will put that in the description so you kind of know where we're at. And I ended on page 54. And I like to fold down my pages so I know where I read last. And we'll just use my little leaf. I try to keep it light and fluffy. At the same time, it's like super deep what we're reading. And I really had no idea what to expect. I have not honestly read like a lot of like SA books. So I really didn't know how like detailed it gets. So if for some reason like the internet is like, hey, no, we cannot be reading this, I'll go another way. I'll do something different. But like I said, we're just kind of like trying this together. It's just like an experiment, and yeah, so just bear with me as it's new for me. And yeah, so so far, like, I'm getting way more into it now. Like, at first I was like, why is he using so many weird words? And I'm like stumbling over myself. But this last few pages seem to be good for me. Yeah, and I do like what he's saying. I like that even if he is like a Christian author, that he's not shoving the IFB mentality down our throats, which is great, because like his religious beliefs are really neither here nor there. It's about trying to heal and trying to get like someone else's perspective, and like, let's just see what we can learn from it. Could be good, could be bad, we might all hate it, who knows. But yeah, let's just keep an open mind and remember that we're all just here to be a like-minded community, just like the IFB churches were supposed to be. I feel like they were supposed to be a community of like-minded people to come together, to be friends, to have babysitters, to join together in singing and praising and worshiping and all that stuff. It wasn't meant to be like this controlling environment that traumatized everyone and that everyone's like secretly being abused, and like it's like a cesspool of the world's worst hypocrites. Not all IFB churches, but like the ones we were dealing with. Because I mean, there are some good people in there. Like, that's what I feel like. It was like IFB was meant to be this thing that could have been really cool and great, and there was like a lot of positivity, but there's just like a huge darker side that is terrifying, scary, and it needs to change. So if you are in an IFB church right now, please do whatever you can to enlighten people, talk to people, you know, ask hard questions of the leaders and see what they say. Ask, like, what do you do if someone comes to you about SA or physical A or whatever, any of those? Ask what the pastor's advice is, and you will learn a lot on their perspectives and if they are trained at all, or ask them if they're mandated reporters and things like that. I think it can make a huge difference if all of us collectively keep the conversations open. And if you don't know how to run a church or a school, maybe check out a public school. It was like public school was like the worst thing ever to IFB. And there are some public schools that are not great, but they've actually learned, and I think they're still learning, because bad things happen there too. They're learning, like, what do we do when someone reports something? What do we do when a teacher does XYZ? How do we handle that? And everyone's kind of learning. So let's all learn together. But yeah, check out what the public school does, because I work in one now and I love the trainings. I think they're awesome, and I'm glad I got trained. So yeah, but I will see you next time. Bye.